You may have noticed that the Euros finals are upon us, and they appear to be getting used as yet another multiculti stick to hit us over the head with. I want to talk about three things. Firstly, this is old hat. There's nothing new about this. Secondly, that it won't work. And thirdly, that patriotism has rightly been described as the last resort of the scoundrel. Now, the idea that PC multiculturalism, multiracialism equals patriotism, that in itself is not new. It was first described, I think best described, by a man called Michael O'Brien, who was Tony Blair's first immigration minister. Now I want to show you a little bit about him from Wikipedia. I could do a video just about him, because what's interesting is his successor, Barbara Roche. She's often fingered as the bad guy who, in terms of the Ministry for Immigration. But I think, although she was a bad guy, I think this fellow, Michael O'Brien, he was the real bad guy. He was the one who really got it going. And if I read from Wikipedia, as Home Office Minister responsible for race relations, Mike O'Brien worked with Jack Straw to set up the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, meeting with the Lawrence family and their lawyers. So you get a flavour of what they were aiming at there, what they were trying to do. He later endorsed the Macpherson report in a book called Institutional Racism and the Police, Fact or Fiction. That is this book here. There, see that? So it's still on Amazon if you want it. It'll cost you 14 quid. And one of the chapters is written by, one of the essays is written by him, and he said, the report is about securing the commitment of all of us to tackling racism, whether open or unwitting, throughout our society, not just in the police force. So that is what you call social engineering or brainwashing. So witting or open or unwitting, whether you're conscious of it or not, your commitment is going to get secured throughout the whole of society. No, that's not what a judicial inquiry is for. It's there to establish facts independent of politics. It is not there to achieve a political aim, but apparently he's saying that's what the aim was here. The important thing for all of us is that Britain is a multiracial society. No, it isn't. There are some people who actually don't like it either. We have a choice whether to succeed as one or not. No. The results of your actions are not your choice. You take actions, you live with the results. Like opening the floodgates, you've got to live with those results. You don't get to choose. Racism in all its guises endangers and undermines the future success of our society. Well, why? Where's his evidence for that? That is why to be racist in today's multiracial Britain is to be un-British. So a bunch of tendentious reasoning non sequiturs. He's basically saying you can't be a patriot unless you are in favour of a multiracial society. It also goes on to say that in 1997, and when he became immigration minister, annual net immigration stood at 56,000, but by 2001, net immigration had risen to 191,500. Now just look at this graph. You see that graph? That's from the National Archives, the Office of National Statistics, and that shows net immigration, whatever that is. But it shows that in 97, 56,000, then up there in 2001, just over 191,000, and that really sharp, nearly vertical increase, that is under O'Brien. Okay, so not someone I like. He's not popular with me. Okay, now let me just do this. Right. Now, we also saw that after the 2012 Olympics, Tony Blair, wouldn't you guess it, came out saying multiracialism, multiculturalism, mass immigration, it's great because Mo Farah won a medal, gold or silver, at the Olympics. And a really extreme example of this is in France in '98. France wins the World Cup in Paris, and the strapline is black, blancs, beurs, and that means black, white and brown. So this that we're seeing now with the Euros finals is quite intense. It's very distasteful, but it's nothing new. It's the same old rubbish being fist fed to you. This is not going to work. That's the second thing. It won't work. It didn't work for Harold Wilson when we won the World Cup, which is a damn sight bigger than the Euros. In '66, Harold Wilson tried to make capital out of it, but he did it in a nice way. He didn't hit you over the head. He was a bit nudge-wink about it. And what he said was, have you noticed how we only ever win the World Cup under a Labour government? Basically saying, I know there's no connection, but it's a bit of a joke I'm having, and some of you might go along with it. But even that, it didn't help him. The next election in 1970, he is said to have timed the precise date for the election to have come a few days before a crucial England game in the 1970 World Cup, in the hopes that everyone would be consumed by patriotism and that would cause them to vote for the party that was in power at the time. It didn't. The Tories won with an overall majority of 30, and he was out. So that effect hasn't worked in Paris. In '98, everyone was saying this proves multiculturalism works. France is a multicultural powder keg today. It has got a horrible future ahead of it, even worse than ours. The French military have recently threatened that they might have to stage a coup if something isn't done about that problem. So the idea, if patriotism if multiracialism was such a good thing for society, you would have expected it to have worked in France. You would have expected that feeling of patriotism to have continued until today in France. It hasn't. It hasn't worked. The Macpherson report, disharmony has only increased since then. I don't think in '97 you would have had a BLM mob going through the cenotaph and climbing the plinth and trying to set light to the flag. So this is all of this patriotic manoeuvring. It has a very opportunistic air to it. I think in that regard it is the last resort of the scoundrel. It is insincere, it is flimsy. The way it works is that patriotism is fundamentally a bit irrational. It tends to say, I like this because I associate it with my country. I think it's a good thing. I think it is right because it's something my country does. Therefore it's right. I would much rather be called a nationalist than a patriot. We're usually told patriotism good, nationalism bad. I think it's the other way around, because I think nationalism is amenable, is far more rational and reasonable and realistic. To me, I would say it is the belief that your nation has the right to continue. I think every nation has the right to continue and to survive. I think the English nation unusually has the duty to continue and to survive because of the good example that we set for less successful nations to follow through our historical, at least, addiction to freedom under law that is morally justified. It makes us successful, and to provide a good example to other nations is probably the kindest thing you can do, because it helps them to be a friend to themselves. So I think the idea that your nation has the right to continue and to survive, I think that is a nationalistic idea. Also, and to survive as a nation, as a group tied by ethnic, even racial bonds. That's what nationalism is about. The root of the word, the etymology, is about birth line, nativity. And the reason for that, the reason why I think that is necessary, is you need to feel that you belong to a group who are attached, who have a feeling for a piece of land, an abode, in order to have a sense of home. If you don't have that, you don't have the sense of home, and then it's very difficult. It's very difficult to survive, to have a sense of any nationhood without that. So I would rather be classed a nationalist than a patriot. What I think happens with patriotism is because it appeals. It's such an appeal to irrationality. It's very easy for rogues to use it to manipulate people, to get people into patriotic fervour, which is an irrational mood, and to then take advantage of that irrational mood by taking a nonsensical, harmful idea and tying it to that patriotic mood, which is not thinking straight. And then you can push through an idea, a notion that people otherwise wouldn't accept. In this case, the idea that multiracialism is the height of patriotism, which I think is being put through on these, not only patriotism, but national success, which I think is very opportunistically being used or occurring in under these Euros, the Euro soccer games. Okay. Now, treachery is always clothed in patriotism for that reason. A little example I could use is the Backing Britain campaign. In 1967, 5 Surbiton secretaries said they're going to work half an hour extra every day, unpaid, in order to get behind Britain. And some pretty not very nice characters jumped on the bandwagon. Robert Maxwell, one of the most repellent characters to have trod the face of the earth, he got on top of it in a big way, trying to recruit his business friends and appearing in the press, going on about it. And someone who comes close behind him in the repellent stakes, that's Jimmy Savile. He also got on board. It didn't go anywhere. Enoch Powell, as usual, poured some cold light of day on it, and pretty cruel but accurate. He said, no, this is just the perfect tool for government to tell the British public it's all your own fault. And so it didn't go any further than that. Enoch, again, he was right there, and he analysed it right. Now, but that doesn't prevent it happening again, because it's such a useful way to manipulate people, to guilt trip people, to get people to accept harmful, irrational notions. Now, to that end, I want to look at two things. The first thing is some comments and writings by Gareth Southgate. They're quite enjoyable, because I don't think he's quite the brightest button. It's not necessary to be a genius in order to be a football manager. You just have to be really good at pushing and motivating your players, but that doesn't require you to be a genius necessarily. The other thing I want to look at is, or to compare that to, is the patriotic propaganda that was put out by Vichy France under German occupation, because that reached a fever pitch of patriotism whilst they were under occupation. Okay, but firstly, what I want to do is to look at Gareth Southgate's propaganda. So if you bear with me whilst I do this. Okay, what I want to look at is 3 articles, 2 of them on Sky, 1 of them written by Gareth Southgate. The first one is just, I'm not going to spend too long on it. Euro 2020, where is home? That's quite good. It's basically, it hits the nail on the head. With this multiracial society will find it very difficult to give people a sense of home, because you won't have the sense of belonging to a group attached to the soil, to a patch of land. Where is home? England squad hailed as a celebration of diversity and immigration. 7 of the 3 Lions players who started against Denmark have a parent or grandparent from overseas, and there's the photo to prove it. Now, most of the rest of the article just goes on about the backgrounds of the different people involved, but then it gets on to the key quote, and that is Lauren Tavriga, Executive Assistant at Best for Britain. Best for Britain is an anti-Brexit organisation that refused to die. Maybe it had some money or some funders left over. Now I think it would call itself an internationalist organisation. I would call it a multicultural, pro-multiracial, pro-immigration, pro-migration organisation. In part, that's part of what it's there for, I think. What she said is the squad, the England squad, is a wonderful example of the benefits of immigration and is a celebration of diversity. No, it's a football team. It's there to win games and win them fair. That's its job. Cheering on football this summer will not just be about celebrating when the ball hits the back of the net. Incidentally, I'd like to read these articles in an Alan Partridge voice, but I can't do him. Okay, it will also be to celebrate diversity, immigration and freedom of movement. So you get that. When the ball goes in the back of the net and you cheer, just remember you're also, in the back of your mind, you're also cheering mass immigration and diversity. Okay, that's what she's saying. That is the crudeness. That's how crudely multiracialism and patriotism are being linked. And football is being used as the glue to stick those two things together. Okay. Now the next thing, that's an article. It quotes Gareth Southgate. Gareth Southgate evokes wartime spirit ahead of final, urging fans to be proud of an island our size. Okay, I don't think he's the brightest button. What does he mean, an island our size? Does he mean if the UK was half the size that we should be more proud, or half as proud? What does he mean? Or maybe 10% less proud? What does he mean by that? It's irrelevant. Southgate claims that England's military past may have been behind their win over Germany earlier in the tournament. He is really pushing. He's pushing that patriotic argument there. Okay. Speaking on Friday, he stressed the wider significance of Sunday's historic showdown against Italy, and he claims that it's encouraging diversity and taking a stand against racism. That is the cause he's putting forward, multiracialism. I don't think he's talking about anything else. I think these are historic things that we can be proud of. Okay, Southgate, 50, claimed that he believed the Blitz spirit was partially behind England's win against Germany earlier on in the tournament. Well, English crowds have been singing 10 German bombers for decades. Okay, it's nothing new. You can't hide that energy in the stadium against Germany was because of that. I never mentioned that to the players, but I know that's part of what the story was. And this is what he tends to do. He tends to say something and to say, yeah, it's really, really true. He doesn't explain why. All right, and there's Boris Johnson. He would never do anything opportunistic. That inclusivity is really important for us because I think that is what modern England is. Okay, multiracialism, that is what it means to be English. That's what England is. And he's saying it's important that parents, when they're talking to their kids, can say, we are quite happy for you to be a Raheem Sterling, a Marcus Rashford, a Calvin Phillips, or whoever they might be. So those are all non-white players, and so parents are going to list the non-white players that they're happy for their children to be. Okay. Now, let me go to the next article. This was written by Gareth Southgate, and it's called Dear England. So I think this is deliciously pompous. Gareth Southgate addresses the nation. You remember where you were watching England games? Well, I know, I've forgotten some of them. And I talk with the authority of someone who played for the school team when he was a boy. And generally, if another boy was more interested in girls than football, I assumed that boy was gay. That's how interested in football I was. I'm quite obsessed about it at one point. You remember where you were and who you were watching with and who you, in italics, were at the time. So it goes to your personal identity. He's claiming quite a lot of authority over you there. All right, so let's get to the next bit. Most of it's a bit boring. I have never believed we should just stick to football. So it's not enough just to be a successful manager. You don't just stick to football. I know my voice carries weight, not because of who I am, but because of the position that I hold. At home, I'm below the kids and the dogs in the pecking order. You know what's coming next, yeah? But publicly, I am the England men's football team manager. I have a responsibility to the wider community to use my voice, and so do the players. So he's got a responsibility to lecture. It's their duty to continue to interact with the public on matters such as equality, inclusivity and racial injustice, basically multiracialism, while using the power of their voices to help put debates on the table. No, he's not interested in debate. Raise awareness and educate. So let's go down a bit. Why would you tag someone in a conversation that is abusive? Well, maybe they disagree with you and you want to debate with them and you're going to use the power of your voice to do that. Incidentally, you don't use the power of your voice to debate. You use the power of your voice to browbeat. But so he's saying you shouldn't tag someone in a conversation that is abusive. New paragraph, italics on, why, italics off. Unfortunately, for those people that engage in that kind of behaviour, I have some bad news. You're on the losing side. Oh, well, okay. It's clear to me, so it's clear to him, well, that we are heading for a much more tolerant and understanding society, not tolerant of opinions like mine, I bet. And I know our lads will be a big part of that. It might not feel like it at times, but it's true. So in case you'd forgotten that it was true and you're starting to think it might be untrue, he's now reminded you that it is true. Right? The awareness around inequality and the discussions on race have gone to a different level in the last 12 months alone. Blah-de-blah. Okay. Of course, my players and I will be judged on winning matches. Only one team can win the Euros. Yeah, and it's a game of two halves. Yeah. We have never done it before and we are desperate to do it for the first time. New paragraph, italics on, believe me, italics off, new paragraph. But the reality is that the result is just a small part of it. Well, it's a small part of it. So, well, lecturing you is the big part of it, I assume. When England plays, there's much more at stake than that. It's about how we conduct ourselves on and off the pitch. Well, I wonder, I'll come to that in a minute. How we bring people together, how we inspire and unite, etc., etc. Well, I think that's more multiracialism and multiculturalism. Okay, so let me just do this now. I think that from Gareth Southgate, I think that's an example of why you shouldn't really listen to footballers. We used to know that the best managers in history have managed perfectly well, been perfectly successful and quite memorable without saying anything about politics. I don't know that Bill Shankly or Bob Paisley or Jose Mourinho said anything about politics. Arsene Wenger, he has a degree in politics, and I'm not aware that he's ever said anything about politics, but Gareth Southgate can't resist it. I suspect he feels it's not quite enough to be admired as a successful football manager. He wants to be admired as a moral and political example. But the problem is he doesn't really have much to say, and he is going to assert it. Now, that means that this, what I think there is also in this is an element of hypocrisy in what he's saying. I want to get to that here by doing this. Now, he's talking about behaviour on and off the pitch. Well, here's an article from Manchester Evening News, this one. Former Liverpool and Man City star decries Raheem Sterling's blatant dive for England penalty. So this is another manager. The Manchester City star was accused of going against the spirit of the game. That's quite harsh criticism. It's basically saying you're a bad sport, you lack sportsmanship, by German pundit Didi Hamann following England's semi-final win. And what he's saying is Dieter Hamann slammed the match officials for missing Raheem Sterling's blatant dive, which ultimately led to England's winning goal against Denmark. It looked like a dive to me, but I'm not an expert. I think this fella, Didi Hamann, he has much better expertise than me. But it's not only him. You can look at Arsene Wenger. What Arsene Wenger said about Raheem Sterling's dive as he slams England's penalty decision. England were awarded an extra time penalty in their victory over Denmark after Joachim Mæhle brought down Raheem Sterling. Okay. Well, basically what Arsene Wenger says is the referee got it wrong and they should have looked at the screen, and they didn't. It wasn't a penalty. Interestingly, what Arsene Wenger said in 2017 was that he said that in 2017 Raheem Sterling had form for diving. Back in 2017, the now FIFA chief branded Sterling a diver for winning a penalty during a 3-1 victory against Arsenal when Wenger was still manager. I believe it was no penalty. We know that Raheem Sterling dives well. He does that very well, he said after the defeat. Okay, so Gareth Southgate has said that one of the important things is how the team, their behaviour on the pitch. Well, I think diving is behaviour on the pitch. If there is evidence that it was a dive, I think a good sport, Southgate, if Gareth Southgate was sincere about that, he should have come out and said we were lucky to get that penalty. Denmark were very unlucky. In fact, we were a bit more lucky than we ought to have been, but sometimes things don't always go your way. Something like that. He should have shown sportsmanship about it. I haven't heard or read anything to the effect saying that he has done. So, what about off the pitch? Well, the fans, they're off the pitch. You see that guy? That's the Danish goalkeeper when the penalty is about to be taken. You see that blotch there? That is a laser being shone in his eyes by an England fan. England have been fined, I think it's 25 grand for that, amongst other things. So I don't think, and I'm not aware, again, that Southgate has come out and said That's really bad behaviour. I'm embarrassed by it. Shouldn't have happened. Fans shouldn't do that. The fans' behaviour, booing during Germany's national anthem. I think something else as well. Fined 25 grand. So, and he hasn't come out and condemned it. So I think his remarks are hollow. His remarks about behaviour on and off the pitch. I think there's an element of I think it's hollow, and something that is hollow lacks substance and is unlikely to cut much ice. Now, I want to compare that in a minute with a French documentary called The Eye of Vichy, which is about the patriotic propaganda put out by the French Vichy government. And what I want to illustrate here is how treachery is nearly always clothed in patriotism. I am not calling Gareth Southgate a hypocrite or a traitor. I'm not saying he's treacherous. I'm not saying that any piece of patriotism involves treachery. I'm saying that treachery will nearly always try and clothe itself in patriotism. And a really vivid example of that is what happened, or the propaganda that Vichy France put out. And this is where you get France is occupied by the Nazis. Vichy France comes under increasing pressure from the German authorities. This is at a time when Germany is extracting 1 million tons of grain a year in requisitions from France, and a lot of other consumables, clothes, shoes, all kinds of butter, meat, all kinds of things, in order to keep conditions in Germany okay, basically by spending false, fake printed money in France, and a lot of coerced labour being sent into Germany, French labourers being sent to Germany, and not to mention the roundup of many thousands of Jews who were sent off to the camps. And yeah, a very unpleasant time where you couldn't get shoes. You had to make your soles to your shoes out of wood. It was not a nice time. But you would think from Vichy propaganda that it was the height of glory, and that submitting to and collaborating with the German authorities was the absolute peak of patriotism. I mean, that propaganda, it is full of military marches, French flags being saluted, popular rallies, Pétain as father of the nation, and the great plan for Europe, and the essence of French life being promoted under German occupation, cafe society, fashion, fine dining, and nothing of the sort happened. But the patriotic propaganda, patriotism was used, and it was actually quite successful because it kept people in Vichy France reasonably compliant. But I want to play you just a couple of short clips of it so you can see how extreme it was. It's hard to imagine that this took place under, or that what we're talking about is a regime under very exploitative, really nasty foreign occupation. Okay, so here's a short clip coming up here, if you can see this. Okay. French flags, popular rallies, French lady, French couture, height of French culture. Okay, and I'll move on a little bit. I'll go on to about here. Again, these massive popular demos, military men and military police. There, Pétain and his cavalcade, cheering crowds, military flags, military music. So that is the kind of propaganda that was used under Vichy France, of all places, just crazily patriotic, and it seemed to work. So we shouldn't be surprised if it's being used, perhaps not quite to that extent, over these Euros finals, to beat us over the head and to tell us that multiracial policy, there is nothing more patriotic, and never has been, and it's only now that we've come to discover it, and so we're going to get it rammed down our throats. So 3 things really. Firstly, If you are so sick of the multiracial propaganda that's being foisted on you at the moment that you don't care who wins the finals, you're probably not alone. Don't feel too bad about it. Secondly, treachery clothes itself in patriotism and puts forward bad ideas as if they were the height of patriotism. It always does, it probably always will. And thirdly, that the propaganda that's being used now it won't cut any ice. It's nothing new. It is in fact a sign of weakness.